Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and demystify something that is literally running your life entirely behind the scenes. Today, we're going to look closely at the cybernetic feedback loop that dictates your daily habits, and more importantly, we'll figure out how you can actually hack your own behavior.
So, for a really long time, the dominant idea in psychology, specifically in the behaviorist school of thought, was that human beings are, well, essentially simple machines. The belief was that we're simply reacting to the stimuli around us. You know the drill: a bell rings, you salivate; a light turns green, you hit the gas pedal. They called it the stimulus response model. But is that really all there is to human behavior? Are we actually just helplessly reacting to whatever life throws at us?
To answer that, here is our roadmap for today. Beyond stimulus and response, the TOTE model explained, real-world behavior loops, upgrading with NLP modalities, and finally, mastering your strategies.
Section 1. Beyond stimulus and response, from reaction to goal-oriented action.
Back in 1960, there was this major breakthrough that completely revolutionized our understanding of human action. Three researchers, George Miller, Eugene Galanter, and Karl Pribram, fundamentally challenged that old behaviorist stimulus-response model. They published a book proving that human behavior isn't just some blind reaction. It's actually a highly purposeful and goal-oriented. They propose that our behavior is cybernetic. And what that means is, our actions are driven by a desire to reduce the difference between our present state and a desired state. We're always aiming for a specific outcome, and we just keep adjusting our actions based on constant feedback until we get there.
Section 2. The TOTE Model explained. Deconstructing the loop.
To explain exactly how this new cybernetic feedback system functions in our brains, these researchers created a truly brilliant yet beautifully simple framework. They called it the TOTE model, which is an acronym standing for test, operate, test, exit. Here's how it works in practice. First, you test by comparing your present state to your desired state. If there's a difference, you operate, meaning you take some kind of action to reduce that difference. Then you test again. Did your action work? If not, you loop right back around and operate again. You only exit the loop when your goal is finally achieved.
This brilliantly illustrates the whole concept using something we literally do every day: boiling a kettle. Think about it. Your first test is checking if the kettle has boiled. It hasn't, so your operation is just waiting. Then you test again. Still not boiling? You loop back around and wait some more. You just continue this simple feedback and response loop until the water actually boils. That final positive test triggers your exit strategy, and boom, you pour your tea.
Section 3. Real-world behavior loops, uncovering your secret programs.
So, how does this simple loop apply to messy, complex human emotions? Well, think about the last time you got stuck in traffic. Let's say someone cuts you off. Your brain instantly runs a very specific road rage strategy. Your initial test is the trigger. You see the car cut in, confirming it visually, plus you get this kinesthetic confirmation because, well, you're already in a bad mood. So you operate. You honk the horn, you yell, maybe make some gestures. Then comes the second test. You compare your current state to your goal. You feel a bit better, but wait, did you flash your headlights? If your specific unconscious goal included flashing your lights and you forgot, you're actually going to stay stuck in this angry loop until you finally flash them.
Now, let's look at a really positive example about overcoming fear. A woman named Ramilla had to break a solid piece of wood with her hand for a test. Her strategy for psyching herself up was a deliberate, totally conscious TOTE loop. Her first test was just stepping up to the board. Then, she operated by visualizing the board breaking, feeling the energy pulse through her arm, and repeating to herself, "You can do it." Her second test was asking herself if she felt sufficiently psyched up. If she didn't, she looped back, built more energy, and only when her confidence absolutely peaked did she exit the loop and strike the board. Section 4. Upgrading with NLP modalities, adding the 5 senses. NLP developers Richard Bandler and John Grinder realized that the TOTE model was amazing, but it kind of needed an upgrade. So they integrated modalities, which is honestly just a fancy technical term for our 5 senses: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, which means feelings and touch, olfactory, and gustatory. They suggested that our operations and tests inside the TOTE loop aren't just abstract, vague thoughts. They are entirely dependent on these very specific sensory representations. We test and operate by making pictures in our heads, talking to ourselves, and feeling physical sensations.
Let's make this concrete. Take a university student named Ben whose goal is calling home. His strategy has distinct sensory steps. First, his test is a kinesthetic trigger. He physically feels homesick. Next, he operates visually by making a mental picture of his family. Then he operates through auditory channels by actually saying the phone number to himself in his head. Finally, he operates kinesthetically again by dialing the phone. This perfectly shows how a seemingly simple behavior loops sequentially through very specific sensory modalities.
So why does all this matter? The crucial takeaway here is that by recognizing these sensory steps, you can figure out and replicate anyone's strategy for success. Consider a coach working with a rowing team. She aligned the team's visual focus, what they were physically feeling, and what they heard in their minds to get them into the absolute perfect competitive state. If they weren't in that state, they just looped back and repeated the sensory strategy until they were totally ready. You can literally model excellence if you just know the sensory steps someone else is taking.
Section 5. Mastering your strategies. Taking control of the loop.
Okay, so how do you actually take control of these strategies in your own life to break bad habits and build better ones? Well, first you have to realize that your behaviors aren't just one simple loop. Complex actions are made of many nested totes, all working simultaneously and sequentially. It's kind of like Russian nesting dolls. If you want to change a bad habit, you have to dissect it. You have to find the specific operation or the specific test inside that nesting doll of loops that is actually causing the problem.
And crucially, all loops must have an exit point. If a loop doesn't have a well-defined exit, you get stuck. This exit is usually triggered by what NLP calls a critical submodality threshold. Sounds complicated, I know, but it just means a specific sensory feeling reaches a peak, like a mental picture in your head suddenly becoming bright enough, or a feeling of confidence in your chest becoming strong enough. Once that threshold is crossed, your brain knows the outcome is achieved and it immediately triggers the exit.
You can map out your own hidden loops by asking yourself 4 highly targeted questions. Next time you catch yourself in a habit, ask yourself this. First, what exactly am I trying to achieve here? That's your outcome. Second, what is the very first step or trigger? That's your cue. Third, what do I do next inside my head? That reveals your operations. And finally, what specific feeling or image lets me know I've achieved my outcome? That isolates your exact exit point.
As Moshe Feldenkrais brilliantly points out in the text, anytime words alone stop you doing what is important to you, change the words. If a specific auditory step in your loop, like, say, a persistent negative self-talk, is stopping you from exiting your loop successfully, you have the absolute power to change that operation. You can literally swap out the sensory data you're feeding into the loop.
Because here's the best part. If you can identify the loop, understand your sensory operations, and pinpoint your critical threshold, you can change the exit point entirely. You are no longer just a stimulus and a response. You are the programmer of your own mind. So the only question left to ask is, what unhelpful behavior loop are you going to rewrite today?